Lady Beatrice will occupy your bedroom.
No one at Ashford Manor imagined that the day their Duke returned home would become the day the Duchess quietly walked away. For 12 years, Eleanor Ashford had greeted her husband in exactly the same place. No matter how long his journeys lasted or how little he wrote during his absence. She always waited beneath the carved oak doors before his carriage reached the front. The servants often whispered that the Duchess possessed an almost impossible patience, because she never complained about the distance growing between them and never allowed disappointment to appear before the household. That afternoon, she stood there once again. The autumn wind carried golden leaves across the stone courtyard while rows of servants lined the entrance hall in perfect order. Every fireplace had already been lit against the evening chill, and the familiar scent of cedar drifted softly through the manor. Everything looked exactly as it had on countless homecomings before. Only fate had decided that this one would be different. The Ashford carriage rolled through the iron gates, its wheels slowing as it stopped beneath the grand portico. A footman hurried forward to open the carriage door, expecting the Duke to step out alone after another journey to London. Instead, two figures appeared. Duke Adrian Ashford descended first, as composed and dignified as ever, his dark coat untouched by the dust of the road. Without saying a word, he turned back toward the carriage and extended his hand to the young woman waiting inside. She accepted it with practiced elegance. Lady Beatrice Sinclair stepped onto the stone steps wearing a sapphire blue traveling gown that immediately caught every eye in the courtyard. She was undeniably beautiful, but what unsettled the servants was not her appearance. It was the confidence with which she looked toward the manor as though she had already decided it belonged to her. A silence settled over the entrance. Several maids exchanged nervous glances before lowering their eyes. The footman remained perfectly still, though more than one pair of hands tightened around polished silver trays. Only Eleanor did not move. It disappeared almost instantly, replaced by the same gentle composure the household had come to admire over the years. She stepped forward and offered Adrian a graceful curtsy. "Welcome home, Your Grace. I hope your journey was a safe one." "It was," Adrian replied evenly. There was no smile. No warmth. Only courtesy. Eleanor then turned toward the young lady beside him. "Lady Beatrice, welcome to Ashford Manor. I trust the road treated you kindly." Beatrice returned the greeting with flawless manners, though satisfaction lingered behind her polite smile. "Thank you, Your Grace. It is an honor to be here." Before another word could be spoken, Adrian addressed the entire household. "There is something you all need to know." Every servant straightened instinctively. "Lady Beatrice will be staying at Ashford Manor." No one reacted. A noble guest remaining for several days was hardly unusual. Then Adrian continued. "Beginning tonight, she will occupy the Duchess's bedroom." The words echoed through the great hall with astonishing clarity. Even the grandfather clock near the staircase seemed louder than before as its pendulum continued its slow rhythm through the silence. No servant dared look directly at the Duchess. The room everyone knew as hers was more than the finest chamber in the house. It symbolized her place beside the Duke, and every person standing there understood exactly what Adrian's announcement meant. Eleanor lifted her eyes to meet her husband's. She searched his expression carefully, not with anger, but with quiet hope that he might soften or admit he had spoken in haste. He did neither. His face remained unreadable. "As you wish," she answered at last, her voice steady enough that no one would have guessed how deeply those words must have wounded her. "I hope Lady Beatrice finds the room comfortable." Adrian frowned almost imperceptibly. "You have nothing else to say?" Eleanor allowed herself the smallest smile. "I have learned that there is little value in arguing against a decision that has already been made." For the first time since arriving, Adrian seemed uncertain. He had expected tears. He had expected accusations. He had even expected Eleanor to refuse. Her calm acceptance unsettled him far more than any confrontation could have. After a long pause, Eleanor turned toward the elderly butler. "Mr. Whitmore." The old servant stepped forward immediately. "Yes, Your Grace. Would you kindly prepare one of the east guest rooms for me? Lady Beatrice should have time to settle before evening." Mr. Whitmore hesitated. His lips parted as though he wished to object, yet decades of discipline prevented him from speaking against his master's command. "At once, Your Grace." "Thank you." Without another complaint or a single tear, Eleanor ascended the grand staircase with graceful, unhurried steps. Every servant watched her disappear along the upper gallery, and not one of them resumed their work after she was gone. Nearly half an hour later, she returned carrying only a modest leather suitcase. The Duchess, who had spent 12 years caring for Ashford Manor, was leaving her own room with fewer belongings than most maids possessed. She stopped before Adrian, reached calmly into her pocket, and placed an old silver key in his hand. "This is the key to the bedroom," she said softly. "Everything inside has been left exactly as I found it this morning." Eleanor then looked toward Lady Beatrice and offered a courteous nod. "I sincerely hope you will be happy here." Those were the last words she spoke inside Ashford Manor. She walked through the great entrance alone, stepped into the waiting carriage prepared for the guest quarters on the estate, and disappeared beyond the iron gates without looking back even once. No order had been given. No bell had rung. Yet every servant remained exactly where they stood. The maids did not return to their duties. The footman did not move. Even Mr. Whitmore continued standing at the entrance, his eyes fixed on the road where the Duchess's carriage had vanished. Only after the sound of the wheels faded into the distance did everyone in the hall fully understand the same heartbreaking truth. The lady who had quietly held Ashford Manor together for 12 years had just walked away. And somehow the house already felt empty. The following morning Ashford Manor woke beneath a pale sky that seemed strangely quieter than usual. For the first time in 12 years the Duchess was no longer the first person awake. There was no gentle voice reminding the kitchen to prepare breakfast for the stable boys before sunrise. No handwritten notes waiting outside the housekeeper's office. And no fresh flowers placed in the entrance hall before the household began its day. The routines remained, the warmth did not. Lady Beatrice noticed none of it. She stood before the tall mirror inside the Duchess's former bedroom, admiring how the morning light spilled across the elegant furnishings. The room was larger than she had imagined, with hand-carved wardrobes, floor-to-ceiling windows, and shelves filled with carefully chosen books instead of expensive ornaments. "It will do," she murmured with satisfaction. She reached for the silver bell resting beside the bed and rang it once. The clear sound echoed through the room. No one came. Assuming the servants had not heard, she rang again, this time more firmly. Still nothing. Her smile faded by the third ring. Irritation had replaced curiosity. "Is anyone there?" Silence answered her. Nearly 5 minutes passed before the bedroom door finally opened. Mr. Whitmore entered alone. The elderly butler bowed with his usual dignity. "You rang, my lady?" Beatrice frowned. "There is no maid assigned to this room." She blinked in disbelief. "What do you mean there is no maid? Every Duchess has a personal maid." Mr. Whitmore remained perfectly composed. "Yes, my lady." "Then send her." "I'm afraid that won't be possible." Beatrice's expression hardened. "And why not?" "Because no servant of Ashford Manor will enter this room." For several seconds, she simply stared at him. She was certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry." "No servant will enter this room, my lady." Her voice rose immediately. "Has the household forgotten who lives here now?" "No, my lady." "Then explain this nonsense." Mr. Whitmore folded his hands behind his back. "It is not defiance." "It certainly sounds like it." "It is simply a promise." Before Beatrice could demand another explanation, the bedroom door opened again. Beatrice turned toward him with obvious frustration. "Your servants are refusing to obey." Adrian looked at Mr. Whitmore. "Is that true?" "It is, Your Grace." His voice contained neither fear nor apology. Adrian frowned. "I gave clear instructions yesterday." "You did, Your Grace. Then why is my order being ignored?" The old butler lowered his eyes briefly before meeting the Duke's gaze again. "No one is refusing to serve Lady Beatrice." "That is exactly what they're doing." "No, Your Grace." Mr. Whitmore paused, carefully choosing every word with the caution of a man who had spent 40 years serving the Ashford family. "They will gladly prepare meals for Lady Beatrice. They will attend her carriage, arrange her wardrobe, accompany her into town, and fulfill every duty expected of this household." He glanced slowly around the bedroom. "But they cannot cross this doorway." Adrian's patience began to wear thin. "I expect a..." The old butler nodded. "There is one." He looked toward the fireplace where yesterday's fire had already been replaced with. "For 12 years, this room belonged to Her Grace. I am aware of that." Perhaps not entirely, Your Grace. The words weighed heavily between them. Adrian's eyes. What exactly are you implying? Mr. Whitmore remained silent for a moment before speaking. This room was never only. Neither Adrian nor Beatrice interrupted him. It became something else. The butler's usually steady voice softened almost imperceptibly. When a kitchen maid lost her mother and could not afford the funeral, she came here. He gestured quietly toward a small table beside the window. When the head gardener's wife fell dangerously ill, he came here. His eyes moved toward the writing desk. When a frightened young footman believed he would lose his position after making an expensive mistake, he came here. Beatrice looked around the room as though seeing it for the first time. Mr. Whitmore continued. Every servant in this house has crossed this doorway at least once, carrying a burden they believed no one else would understand. Adrian stared at him without speaking. The Duchess never turned anyone away. Another silence settled over the room. Finally, Adrian asked the question that had unexpectedly begun to trouble him. And what happened after they came here? Mr. Whitmore looked toward the empty chair beside the fireplace, where Eleanor had spent countless evenings reading or writing letters. They always left believing tomorrow would be better. The room fell completely still. For the first time since Eleanor's departure, Adrian slowly looked around the bedroom not as its owner, but as though he were standing inside a place he had never truly known. Adrian remained in the doorway long after Mr. Whitmore had fallen silent. The bedroom looked exactly as it always had, yet for the first time since his marriage, he noticed details he had somehow ignored for years. The room contained fewer jewels than most noblewomen would have displayed, while its shelves were crowded with books. Neatly labeled journals, dried flowers pressed between pages, and dozens of carefully folded letters tied together with faded ribbons. Nothing about it resembled the private chamber of a woman obsessed with rank. It looked like the office of someone who had quietly spent years caring for other people. "Leave us," Adrian said at last. Beatrice looked at him in surprise. "But I need a moment." Reluctantly, she followed Whitmore into the corridor, leaving the Duke alone inside the room. For several minutes, Adrian wandered without purpose. Inside were dozens of neatly wrapped coins, each bundle marked with a name rather than an amount. He recognized none of them. When Mr. Whitmore returned a short while later, Adrian was still standing there. "Who are these people?" The old butler glanced toward the names and answered quietly. "Members of the household, Your Grace." Adrian picked up one bundle. "This one belongs to Thomas, the stable boy. And Eleanor kept money for him?" Mr. Whitmore nodded. "His father died in a quarry accident 4 years ago. Her Grace learned that the boy wished to become a farrier one day, so she set aside part of her personal allowance every month to pay for his apprenticeship." Adrian slowly lowered the bundle. "I was never told." "No, Your Grace." "Why not?" "Because Her Grace asked that you never be troubled with such matters." The answer unsettled him more than he expected. He reached for another packet. "Mrs. Collins. The cook." Adrian frowned. "The cook has worked here for years." "She has." "What did Eleanor do for her?" Mr. Whitmore smiled faintly, the first genuine smile Adrian had seen since yesterday. "Mrs. Collins's son possessed an extraordinary gift for mathematics. Her Grace believed he deserved an education beyond what his family could afford, so she secretly paid his tuition at the grammar school in York." Adrian stared at the envelope in his hand. "And the boy? He graduates this winter." The Duke remained silent. Another name caught his attention: Samuel Green. "The head gardener. I remember him." Mr. Whitmore inclined his head. "When Mrs. Green became seriously ill 3 years ago, every physician in the county refused to travel without payment in advance. Her Grace sold one of her own pearl necklaces the following morning." Adrian looked up sharply. "Sold her jewelry?" "Yes, Your Grace." "I never noticed it was gone." "No." The old butler did not speak the words aloud, but Adrian understood what remained unsaid. He had never noticed many things. His gaze drifted across the room until it rested upon the comfortable chair beside the fireplace. "Did they all come here?" "They did." "How often?" "More often than you might imagine." Adrian let out a slow breath. "I thought this room was simply her private retreat." "It was," Mr. Whitmore replied gently. "Her Grace merely believed that a private room should also be a place where frightened people could feel safe." The Duke walked toward the window, looking over the grounds where gardeners had already begun their morning work. "They never told me." They believed it was not their story to tell. Another long silence followed. Finally, Adrian asked almost reluctantly, "Who came here most recently, Mr.?" Whitmore answered without hesitation, "Emily. The young housemaid." "Yes, Your Grace. I remember hearing she nearly resigned." The butler nodded. "She intended to." "What happened?" Mr. Whitmore's expression grew solemn. "She had accepted an engagement before coming to Ashford Manor. After the wedding, her fiancé became violent. He forbade her from working, controlled every penny she owned, and struck her whenever she tried to leave." Adrian slowly turned toward him. "I knew nothing about this." "No one wished Your Grace to know. And Eleanor?" "Her Grace arranged a solicitor, paid every legal expense herself, and found Emily a position here under another surname until her husband could no longer." The Duke said nothing. Outside, the sound of birds drifted faintly through the open window. Inside the room, every object seemed to carry a story he had never cared enough to discover. He walked toward the bookshelf and noticed that several volumes contained pressed flowers between their pages. Curious, he opened one of them. A small handwritten note slipped onto the carpet. It contained only a single sentence: "Kindness should never leave a witness." Adrian read the line twice. There was no signature. There did not need to be. He folded the note carefully and returned it to its place. At that very moment, voices echoed from downstairs. Beatrice's impatient tone carried clearly through the hall. "I don't care how things were done before. This house will follow my rules now." No one answered her immediately. Instead, Adrian heard something that surprised him even more. Not a single servant hurried to obey. For the first time in his life, he began to understand that obedience could be commanded by authority, but loyalty had to be earned. By that evening, an uneasy silence had settled over Ashford Manor. The servants continued their duties with the same precision they always had, yet something invisible had changed. Meals arrived on time, the gardens remained immaculate, and every corridor gleamed as though nothing had happened. Only the laughter that had once drifted through the house during quiet moments had disappeared. Lady Beatrice noticed it immediately. "They're polite," she said as Adrian entered the drawing room, "but they're treating me like a stranger." Adrian looked up from the letter in his hand. "You are new to the household." "I've been here long enough." "No." She frowned. "They answer every question with yes, my lady, yet no one speaks unless I ask them something. They leave the moment their work is finished, and not one of them looks me in the eye." Adrian offered no reply. For the first time, he understood exactly why. Respect could be demanded. Affection could not. Beatrice placed her teacup onto the table with more force than, "This has gone far enough. Dismiss a few of them and the rest will remember who is in charge." The room fell quiet. A moment later, Mr. Whitmore appeared at the doorway. "You wish to see me, Your Grace?" Adrian nodded. Before he could speak, Beatrice answered instead. "I want every servant who refuses to show proper loyalty dismissed before the end of the week." The old butler neither argued nor defended himself. Instead, he stepped forward carrying a worn leather notebook. "I believe this belongs to Her Grace." Adrian recognized it immediately. It had been resting on the writing desk in Eleanor's room. "I found it while preparing the room this afternoon." He placed the notebook before the Duke. "I thought Your Grace should see it before deciding anything." Adrian opened the cover. The handwriting was unmistakably Eleanor's. Every page contained a date, a name, and a short note: "Thomas apprenticeship payment due next Monday. Remember to encourage him. He worries more than he admits." The next page: "Mrs. Collins send extra flour to her sister before winter. Pretend it came from the estate stores so she won't refuse it." Another page: "Samuel Green, physician, returns in 2 weeks. Ask whether his wife is sleeping better." Adrian turned another page. Then another. Every entry described someone's hardship, someone's illness, someone's child, or someone's quiet dream that Eleanor had somehow remembered. There were birthdays, wedding anniversaries, medicine schedules, school tuition, funeral expenses. Nothing had been forgotten. At the bottom of every page appeared the same sentence written in smaller letters than the rest. "Do not let His Grace know." Adrian stopped turning the pages. He stared at those 6 words until they blurred before his eyes. "She wrote this every time," Mr. Whitmore answered softly. "Every time, Your Grace." "Why?" "Because Her Grace never wished gratitude to become a burden." The Duke lowered his eyes once more. Suddenly, memories he had long ignored returned with painful clarity. The pearl necklace that had disappeared years ago. The anonymous gifts delivered every Christmas. The estate accounts that had always balanced despite expenses he had never questioned. He had assumed capable stewards were responsible. He had never once wondered whether Eleanor had quietly carried the weight herself. For the first time in many years, shame settled heavily upon him. Several months passed. No one occupied the Duchess's bedroom. The furniture remained untouched. Fresh flowers appeared there every Monday, though no servant admitted placing them inside. One rainy afternoon, a carriage stopped before the manor. Mr. Whitmore entered Adrian's study with unusual haste. "Your Grace, the Duchess has returned." Adrian rose so quickly that his chair scraped across the floor. He found Eleanor standing in the library, exactly where she had once spent countless evenings reading. She looked peaceful. Healthier than he remembered. There was no bitterness in her expression, only quiet confidence. "I came for a few books," she explained. "I hope you don't mind. You never needed permission." A gentle silence followed. Months earlier, Adrian would have filled it with pride. Now he searched for words that seemed painfully inadequate. "I've read your notebook." Eleanor smiled faintly. "I suspected one day you might. I finally understand." She looked at him with calm eyes. "No, Adrian." He blinked. "You've only begun." Those words carried no anger. Only truth. He lowered his head. "I cannot change what I failed to see." "No. But I wanted you to know that I see it now." For a long moment, Eleanor simply studied the man standing before her. Then she gathered the books she had come to collect. "I truly hope you do." She walked toward the door. This time, Adrian did not ask her to stay. Love that had been neglected for 12 years could not be repaired by a single apology. He watched her leave the library, cross the entrance hall, and disappear beyond the front doors without looking back. The carriage rolled away slowly beneath the blooming trees. He unlocked the Duchess's bedroom with the old silver key she had returned months earlier. Everything remained exactly where Eleanor had left it. The chair beside the fireplace. The books upon the shelves. The empty writing desk where countless acts of kindness had quietly begun. He closed the door gently behind him. From that day forward, no one ever occupied the room again. Visitors often assumed it had been preserved because it belonged to a duchess. Only the servants knew the truth. It had been preserved because it once belonged to the woman who taught an entire household that kindness could command a loyalty no title ever would.